It's the principle of the thing. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angles brought to you, as usual, by the members at BillWhittle.com. And by usual, I mean always. Thank you to those members. Ladies and gentlemen, the Washington Post holds a story that the Supreme Court, in an 8-1 ruling, decided to essentially give permission for a case to advance involving a student who had a complaint against Gwinnett College, Georgia's Gwinnett College, because of its prohibition against him preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ on campus outside of what were then referred to as free speech zones. Now, the interesting thing about this case is that the Supreme Court did not evaluate the merits of the case, but basically said that the student could continue to have a case when he's not pursuing any kind of serious damages. I mean, it literally could be as small as $1 that he's trying to get here, but the case can go forward. And I'll read it from the Washington Post story here. It said the issue was whether the students, and I'm leaving the student's name out, not because we're trying to protect his identity, but because I can't pronounce it. The issue is whether the students demand for that the college pay him a nominal amount of money in damages, which could be as little as $1, kept his civil rights case alive, or whether it was moot once the university agreed to his complaint and ended its offending speech policy. So the university, Stephen Green, gives up on this speech policy that kept him from preaching the gospel just anywhere, that he had to just do it in these free speech zones. And still the student says, no, it's the principle of the thing. We want this college to have to be found guilty in a court of law of violating free speech. And the vast majority of the U.S. Supreme Court says, yeah, it is the principle of the thing. What do you think of this ruling, Steve?
I love it a lot. I'm not going to talk about John Roberts because I've been in a good mood all morning, and I would like to stay that way. What I'm reminded of here, I don't know if you ever read the book by Leon Uris or saw the TV miniseries that came out. Gosh, I was a kid, and I haven't seen the thing in probably 40 years, and I haven't read the book probably since high school, and I'm not even going to tell you how long ago that was. But the book is QB7. And it tells the story of a doctor in Britain who sues this novelist for a libel because this, if I recall correctly, there was a character that was obviously based on the doctor who had committed all of these Nazi war atrocities during the Second World War. And all the evidence comes out in court. It's a courtroom drama, and I enjoy those. And as the evidence comes out, the jury does decide to award damages to the doctor, but the evidence, while maybe slanderous, or libelous, I should say, was so damning to the doctor's character and his history during the war that the judge awarded, and I think this was the exact line from the book, 1/2 penny, the smallest coin in the realm. And in this way, justice was served. Legally, the doctor had been libeled, and so he was found that he deserved some kind of award. But due to his horrible history and wretched Nazi war crimes and all the rest, he was awarded the very least amount that could be given. This is sort of the positive version of that case. You know, professors are free to preach from the gospel of Marx and Lenin in their classrooms and seem determined to do just that, whether or not the students really want to be taught that. The idea of having free speech zones is just anathema to me. I think the first time I ever came across those face-to-face was at the 2008 Democratic and Republican conventions, where they set up these free speech areas that are fenced in. And it basically makes you feel like a prisoner for protesting against a political party that you don't like. That strikes me as un-American as well. I want this case to go forward. I want this kid to win. And I want the award to be $1 or a penny or maybe even a half penny. We could chop one in half. Not because the kid deserves some millions of dollars or doesn't deserve millions of dollars, but to, for once and for all, establish the principle that's already enshrined in the First Amendment that this country is a free speech zone.
Bill Whittle, the judge in the initial case declared the case moot because the university had already changed its policy. And then a panel of the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit agreed that the case was moot, but the Supreme Court did not, and by a wide majority on this thing. Here's from the attorney for the plaintiff, for this college student. She said, when government officials, quote, engage in misconduct but face no consequences, it leaves victims without recourse, undermines the nation's commitment to protecting constitutional rights, and emboldens the government to engage in future violations. What do you think about this kind of approach of pressing a court case that some could say at this point is frivolous because the student got what he wanted already?
Well, let's start by informing Mr. Green that the correct pronunciation of halfpenny in England is halfpenny.
I stand corrected. Well, I sit corrected.
So this guy should, even if the guy should get a hay dollar, he wants to win it, and I'm with him 100% on this. We have this idea in civil law about punitive damages, and there have been certainly cases of punitive damages being abused, but the idea is that the reason you put punitive damages in place is to deter other transgressions. In other words, if I have an amusement park ride and I forget to check the clearance and it takes somebody's head off, normal sized person, then the people can sue me for the cost, the damage that's done to them by the loss of my family member. But they can also add punitive damages, which are above and beyond making somebody as whole as you can by the loss of a family member. And the idea behind this is that if you hit this park with $1 million of damages for the loss and $20 million of punitive damages, then that is going to tell the park and tell all of the other amusement parks, maybe you ought to get out there with a tape measure at some point and make sure that this doesn't happen again. That's the entire idea. It's a deterrence issue when applied correctly. And that's what this guy's looking for. He's looking for punitive damages because he wants the announcement of guilt. And he's right, because what this college did was fundamentally anti-American. It's not just a question of you got caught and now you're going to change it. Hey, sorry, we lopped that guy's head off. We've lowered the seats a little bit. That's not going to happen again. No, you're responsible for what happened in the first place because of your reckless misconduct. And the thing that I find most interesting about all of this, and the reason I think this kid is still fighting, is I want to know what kind of people it is make up the. I want to know about the people on the university side. In other words, they've already realized that this was a mistake. They've already realized that they've been sued. They've already removed the idea of free speech zones. Those no longer exist as a basis of this lawsuit. But they are not willing to admit that they were wrong in the first place. And that's what this case is about. That's why it continues to go forward. So this guy can win his hay dollar or whatever he's going to get. I think he ought to win $1 million or at least that much. He ought to win enough money to make it clear to colleges that if you do this flagrant violation of the Constitution in order to appease this creepy small minority of the woke mob, then it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you significantly. It should hurt. It should hurt. And that's why I am 100% behind this kid. And I wish him the very best. And I find it especially pleasing that he's fighting for what he was actually speaking about. In other words, this guy is not only fighting for freedom of speech, he's fighting for freedom of religion as well. He's kind of like the First Amendment super kid. And he deserves to win this one. And he deserves what he's looking for, a dollar reward, but an admission that the university was fundamentally wrong to put restrictions on speech and on religion, that it was unconstitutional and that they were in the wrong.
And I think the overall point that the Supreme Court is making here is that this is not just some private dispute between two individuals, like Steve and I had a deal to buy a car and I cheated him out of $250 on the purchase of the car, because that has no wider ramifications beyond the two of us in general in a private transaction. This situation with Gwinnett College and so many universities across the country, which have decided that they need to rein in harmful ideas so that the kids don't hear any harmful ideas, outside of the classroom, that this needs to be made a public example. This has ramifications well beyond one kid trying to preach the gospel on his college campus. And so I'm greatly encouraged that the court said, yeah, the principle means something here. In a related, or actually it's not really related, but something that made me think along these same lines, I read a story today about one of these lawsuits against a big corporation, and the corporation paid $3 million and admitted no wrongdoing. And I just thought, okay, so why'd you pay the $3 million? And the corporate lawyers would say, well, we just didn't want to spend any more money fighting the case, and it's a public relations hassle and stuff like that. If you're right, you fight. If you go to court and you are on the right side of the law, if you're on the side of justice, then you hang in there until you get that verdict. If you're not, you give somebody $3 million and admit no wrongdoing. And I just don't think the courts should allow people to do that and basically buy off the system of justice, because what it does basically is create two systems of justice. It creates a system of justice for people who can afford it and another system for people who can't, because I don't have $3 million to pay off somebody so that Steve stops bad-mouthing me about the way I cheated him on the car deal. I would be convicted in court over that. And these people should be too. And Gwinnett College needs to be made an example in this case, although I'm not, it's not personal with me and Gwinnett. You could pick any university you want who engage in this kind of behavior, but they need to be held up in front of the highest tribunal in the land for somebody to say, no, you do the right thing, and if you don't do the right thing, you get punished. And if you try to violate the U.S. Constitution using taxpayer dollars to clamp down on free speech, then you deserve to be found guilty of that. And God bless this kid for hanging in there. I know it's a tough decision, especially for Christians who have a tendency to want to show grace and love and forgiveness. But there is a thing called righteousness, and righteousness is worth standing up for. And you can do that in a way that is legal and ethical, but you need to persist in that. And so I'm excited that he's doing that, and I'm even more excited that such a large majority of the U.S. Supreme Court agreed. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.